Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Out in the wilds of New Mexico, ex-federal agent John Marlowe just wanted peace on his hard-earned ranch. But when a power-hungry HOA tries to steal his land with lies, forged maps, and midnight raids, they ignite a war they never saw coming. And John, he doesn't back down. Ever. It was the kind of morning that makes you forget people are idiots. Cool desert air, a deep stretch of sky turning gold over the mesas, the smell of mesquite still lingering from last night's fire. I had a cup of coffee in one hand and a feed bucket in the other, walking past the corral while Daisy and the other horses snorted their greetings. Life at the edge of nowhere had its perks, chief among them being no neighbors. At least, that's what I thought when I bought this spread. The ranch was mine, fair and square. 120 acres of dry, stubborn New Mexico land with 3 wells, 2 barns, and a half-finished bunkhouse I was turning into a guest cabin. I'd left federal service 2 years ago after a bullet tore through my hip during an arrest in El Paso. Spent 20 years putting white-collar snakes in prison. After that, peace and dirt sounded like a damn promotion. So when the first letter came in the mail, I thought it was a joke. Official-looking, letterhead from High Desert Estates HOA. Some little Mickey Mouse outfit 5 miles west of me. The envelope had this gold logo on it, like they were running a gated community in Beverly Hills, not the ass end of the desert. It said I was in violation of multiple community rules, unauthorized livestock, unapproved outbuildings, unacceptable exterior paint. I actually laughed out loud at that last one. My barn's color offended someone's sense of decorum. Tough shit. The barn was here before their HOA broke ground, and so was I. I tossed the letter in the burn barrel behind the porch. Then came another. This time, they were demanding I pay $800 in association dues for the last 2 quarters, along with a list of corrective actions and a threat to fine me $200 a day starting the following week. That one I didn't burn. I took it inside, scanned it, and sent a PDF back to their return address with my own letter attached. Short and sweet. This property is not, and has never been, under the jurisdiction of High Desert Estates or any HOA. Attached, you will find a certified cadastral map, land title documentation, and a letter from the county clerk's office confirming the parcel is zoned agricultural, unincorporated, and HOA exempt. Do not contact me again. I CC'd my lawyer, Lila Crawford. She's sharp, she's meaner than a desert rattler, and she's handled enough land disputes in New Mexico to know exactly how to squash these wannabe bureaucrats. A week passed in silence, and I figured that was the end of it. Then I got what they called a final enforcement notice. $7,800 in penalties, plus a veiled threat about escalation through appropriate legal channels if I didn't comply. There was also this gem. Your use of horses violates the High Desert Estates Urban Wildlife Compatibility Policy. I had to read that one twice. Urban Wildlife Compatibility. I was 5 goddamn miles away from their nearest fence line. Only wildlife I had a problem with were the coyotes that tried to eat my chickens. That night, I sat on the porch with a bourbon and stared at the stars, thinking about how deep stupid could go when it was organized. I wasn't worried. I had the deeds, the maps, and a steel gate with my name burned into it, but I had a feeling they weren't done yet. People like this Karen, because, of course, her name was Karen, they don't stop when the law tells them to. They stop when someone makes it cost them. And so, I waited. I didn't have to wait long. I was stringing a new length of fence near the northern grazing line when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Nobody showed up unannounced out here unless they were lost, selling religion, or looking for trouble. I grabbed my gloves, dusted my hands, and walked toward the drive. 2 patrol vehicles were idling just inside the gate, lights off, but clearly not here for a neighborly chat. One was marked from the county sheriff's office, the other was an unmarked Dodge Durango, probably a deputy's take-home ride. 3 uniforms total, 1 tall, lean rookie standing like he just learned how to draw his sidearm last week, 1 clipboard type with mirrored sunglasses, and 1 older officer hanging back with a weary look that said he already regretted this trip. I unlatched the gate, letting it swing open with a creak. "Morning," I said, calm and steady. "Something I can help you with." The rookie stepped forward like he was about to make a bust on America's Most Wanted. "We received a report concerning illegal structures and possible unauthorized livestock. We also have a report of water theft and potential firearms violations." I raised an eyebrow. That right. The clipboard guy handed me a folded sheet of paper with the HOA's logo at the top. It was a formal complaint, riddled with absurd claims, that I'd fenced in public land, tapped into a shared water supply, and was operating an unlicensed paramilitary training camp. I shit you not, that was actually typed on there. Where exactly are you from? I asked, reading the paper. High Desert Estates Homeowners Association, the rookie said, puffing up a little. They've expanded jurisdiction recently, and this land may fall under their... I cut him off. No, it doesn't. He blinked. Excuse me? I turned to the older officer, who hadn't said a word yet. Sergeant R. Rivera, his name tag read. He was watching me closely, squinting like he was trying to place my face. Sergeant, I said slowly, do you know what this land is? He looked at the complaint, then back at me. This your name? John Marlowe. That's me. He stared a second longer. Marlowe, from the JPX case. I nodded once. He let out a long sigh. Well, hell. The rookie looked back and forth between us, confused. Rivera turned toward his men. Stand down. We're not executing anything here. No warrant, no probable cause, no jurisdiction. But Sergeant, the HOA. I don't give a damn what the HOA said, Rivera snapped. HOAs don't issue warrants, and they sure as hell don't own this land. You boys wait in the car. He stepped forward, lowering his voice as the other two retreated. Sorry about this, John. We've been getting pressure from their board president, Karen something. She's been calling the station every week with complaints. Told the sheriff's office this was abandoned transitional property under disputed zoning. Hell, she even filed a request to reclassify your land with the county. She's playing dirty, I said, jaw tight. Filing fake maps, making up claims, and using your boys to intimidate me. Today she tried it on my daughter's birthday. You can tell her that one didn't land. Rivera gave a dry chuckle. You still sharp as ever. You got the parcel docs handy? In the house. I walked him inside, handed him the certified title, zoning map, and county registrar's letter I'd had laminated for just such occasions. He took one look and nodded. I'll log this as a false report and file a note with the office that your land is completely outside HOA boundaries. Any future calls will redirect through legal. Appreciated, I said, though I could already feel the storm clouds gathering. Karen hadn't sent the cops because she thought she'd win. She'd sent them to see if I'd blink, but I wasn't blinking. The next morning, I was in town picking up feed and a new carburetor for my hay baler when I stopped by the county land office. After the incident with the sheriff's deputies, I wanted to make sure everything on the books was still clean. No sneaky changes, no backdoor reclassifications. Something in the way Karen had phrased her complaints with all that bureaucratic jargon made my gut itch. She wasn't just tossing darts at the wall. She had a plan. I waited 15 minutes in a dusty government lobby that smelled like printer toner and stale coffee before a clerk named Debbie waved me in. She remembered me from when I first filed the title transfer. Friendly enough. What can I help you with today, Mr. Marlowe? Wanted to double-check the zoning file on my parcel, make sure no amendments have been slipped in. She typed for a moment, frowned, then leaned closer to the monitor. That's weird. Words you never want to hear from a county official. What's weird? I asked. Well, there was a jurisdictional update filed last month. It looks like your parcel has been added to a new overlay. High Desert Estates Administrative Zone. Did you authorize that? I barked out a laugh before I could stop myself. Hell no. She clicked a few more times, then turned the screen toward me. There it was. A shiny new digital map, complete with a shaded extension of HOA territory bleeding into my land like a goddamn tumor. A PDF showed a consent form, supposedly signed by me, with my name spelled John Marlowe, no H, and an address I'd never used in my life. You have got to be kidding me, I muttered, leaning in. That's not my signature. That's not even my handwriting. And this address, that's a fucking UPS store. Debbie pursed her lips. This is serious, Mr. Marlowe. Falsifying land documents is a criminal offense. I'll have to notify the registrar. Do it, I said. And send me a certified copy of the full file. Everything they filed, every version, every stamp. I drove straight to my attorney's office. Lila looked at the packet I handed her, eyes narrowing behind her glasses. They forged a jurisdictional overlay, she said, flipping pages. Idiots. They actually filed this with the county. Jesus. This isn't just HOA overreach. This is attempted land fraud. They think they can intimidate me into compliance. Well, they just walked themselves into a felony, she said, grabbing her phone. I'm filing a complaint with the district attorney's office today, and we're going to need to get a forensic handwriting analyst to sign off on this being fake. By noon, the DA's office had been formally notified. I filed an affidavit, submitted the real signature samples, and watched as the case number was assigned in the system. Just like that, the whole game changed, but Karen wasn't done. That night, I found a printed flyer duct taped to my gatepost. All properties under high desert estates are expected to be in full compliance. Failure to remove unauthorized livestock will result in legal action. No name, no return address, just the HOA logo in smug gold foil. I didn't tear it down. I left it there, flapping in the wind like a warning flag. They wanted a war? Fine. 3 days passed before the county registrar confirmed what I already knew. The jurisdictional overlay filed by High Desert Estates was fraudulent. The land was still legally mine, still unincorporated, still as independent as the horses that roamed it. But that didn't stop Karen from acting like she owned the damn horizon. I'd spent that morning reinforcing the south fence line. My older gelding had figured out how to lift the latch with his nose, and I wasn't about to start chasing him into the arroyo every other day. The sun was already baking the dirt into cracked red sheets by noon, and I was soaked with sweat and dust. That's when I noticed the gate was leaning just slightly, like it had been tugged or bumped. I didn't think much of it until I saw the fresh tire tracks. They weren't mine. 2 sets, narrow like from a pair of compact SUVs, maybe Jeeps. They'd come right up to the edge of my property line and then turned sharply into the brush near the hay barn. The weird thing, there weren't any signs of people getting out. No footprints, no trash, just rubber scars in the dirt that ended in nothing. I walked the fence line another half hour, thinking maybe kids were joyriding or some drifter got lost. That was when I spotted the shimmer, low and just inside the barn's open side, a camera. Small, mounted, pointed out across the yard like it was part of some private surveillance system. I hadn't installed that one. I moved slow, keeping to the wall, and crept around back to find a second one tucked under the eaves, this one aimed straight at the corral. It was amateurish, really. Wrong angle, no camouflage, just lazy desperation disguised as control. I yanked both of them down and took them inside, dropping them on my kitchen table like 2 dead bugs. Lila stopped by later that day to drop off copies of the forged documents, and when I showed her the cameras, her jaw clenched. Jesus. They're escalating. No kidding, I said, pouring her a glass of iced tea. We ran through the legal channels again, this time logging an official complaint for criminal trespass and unauthorized surveillance. Meanwhile, Lila called in a favor with an investigator who specialized in HOA corruption cases. Apparently, that's a real job now. America 2025. While the paperwork churned through the system, I installed my own cameras, better ones. Motion-activated night vision connected to a private cloud server and backed up to a drive in a hidden safe in the barn. I mounted decoys too, just for fun. Let them think they're watching me while I'm really watching them. That night, I stayed up late reviewing the past few weeks on the newly retrieved SD cards from the foreign cameras. What I found made my blood pressure spike. 2 nights ago, at 3 in the morning, a pair of men in HOA polo shirts, matching khakis and all, had walked straight up to my fence with shovels. They unbolted one of the steel corner posts, dug a small hole, and planted a wooden sign. Then they took a few photos and left. The sign read, "Welcome to High Desert Estates. Community property begins here." They were trying to rewrite reality with hammers and staples. I called the sheriff's department and sent them the footage. Rivera called me back personally. "Jesus, John, these people are not subtle." "No, they're not," I said. "And they're getting bolder. We'll open a new incident report and loop in the DA's office. Looks like your land's become a battlefield." He wasn't wrong, but it didn't end there. The next day, I got an anonymous email. The subject line was "Heads Up," and the body was a single attachment, a PDF of an internal HOA email thread. One of the names matched that of a junior board member I'd met once at the feed store. Maybe he'd grown a conscience. In the email, Karen was writing to her board. He thinks just because he has federal paper, he can ignore the community. "We need that land to link Phase 3 to the highway expansion. He's in the way. If he doesn't comply, we will litigate until he does, or until we own what's left." Phase 3. Expansion. She wasn't just some meddling old woman with too much free time. She was orchestrating a land grab, using intimidation, fake paperwork, illegal surveillance, and dirty tricks to pave the way for commercial access, and I was in her way. I printed out the email, stapled it to a copy of the jurisdictional fraud case, and taped them both to my fridge, just to remind myself who I was dealing with. I didn't buy this land to fight a war, but if a war was coming to me, I'd damn well make sure it ended on my terms. The lawsuit dropped on a Thursday, slid into my mailbox in a thick, glossy envelope that practically reeked of self-importance. Notice of civil action, High Desert Estates, ver. John Marlowe. I thumbed through the legal jargon, skimming for what kind of circus I was dealing with. According to their attorneys, some downtown firm with a name like a country club, they were accusing me of trespassing on community land, operating a non-compliant agricultural business, and, get this, defaming the reputation and integrity of the HOA. I laughed. Out loud, in the middle of the driveway, with the horses watching me like I'd lost my mind. Defamation. These people had forged land records, trespassed with shovels and cameras, and now they were mad because I told the truth? I called Lila. She didn't laugh. She cursed so hard I had to put the phone at arm's length. This is textbook escalation, she said. They're trying to flip the narrative, make you the aggressor. Well, that's cute, I replied. They picked the wrong guy to put on the defensive. The same afternoon, Lila filed a counterclaim, but she didn't just swat back with denials. She went nuclear. We sued the HOA and Karen personally for criminal trespass, attempted land fraud, falsification of public records, invasion of privacy, defamation, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress for good measure. We also included a demand for injunctive relief to prevent any further contact or encroachment, and a monetary compensation claim for $5 million based on damages to the ranch's value, stress, disruption of operations, and reputational harm. Lila sent the suit by courier with a press packet attached because we weren't just fighting this in court. Karen wanted publicity. She'd get it. The next morning, reporters showed up. One from the Albuquerque Sentinel, another from a regional legal blog, and a crew from some local news affiliate. I wasn't thrilled about the attention. Hell, I moved out here to get away from people, but if Karen wanted to drag this into the spotlight, I'd stand in the sun. I gave a short statement at the gate, holding up the forged consent form with its hilariously fake John Marlowe signature. I didn't join an HOA, I told them. I didn't consent to anything. I live on private land, legally documented, lawfully owned. What High Desert Estates has done isn't just dishonest, it's criminal, and now they'll be held accountable. Apparently, that clip made the 5 o'clock news. I know because the feed store cashier showed me on his phone the next day while bagging my oats. Said I looked like Clint Eastwood with a shovel. Later that week, subpoenas went out to the HOA board. Rivera's department served 2 of them personally. One of his deputies texted me a photo of Karen's face when she opened the door. Said she looked like she'd swallowed a cactus. Meanwhile, the forensic handwriting expert Lila hired released his preliminary report. The signature on the consent form wasn't just fake. It had been traced. You could see the wobble lines under magnification, the hesitation in the curves, amateur hour, and then came the big hit. The district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation. Turns out Karen's little expansion plan wasn't limited to just my land. 2 other parcels on the fringe of High Desert Estates had been added via similarly suspicious filings. One belonged to a retired Air Force colonel, the other to a Navajo widow who'd lived on her land for 30 years. Now it was a pattern. The DA froze HOA assets pending the outcome of the case. That meant legal fees, maintenance, landscaping, even the clubhouse pool service halted. And the community? They started noticing. I got an anonymous letter in the mail, handwritten neat, no return address. I didn't know she was lying. None of us did. She said you were squatting. I'm sorry. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Cracks were forming. The board was splintering. And Karen, once queen of her little kingdom, was starting to lose her grip. But the fight was far from over. It was quiet for a couple of days. Too quiet, really. No letters, no emails, no smug gold foil flyers duct taped to my gates. The kind of silence you get just before the mountain lion hits the fence line. I spent the time tightening things down around the ranch. Put a second lock on the equipment shed, added motion sensors to the southern approach, and moved the backup server to a fireproof case under the floorboards in my office. Paranoia? Maybe. But I've seen how dirty people get when they're cornered. Late one night, the silence broke. It was just after 2 a.m. I was in bed, not quite asleep, when the security system sent a buzz to my phone. Motion detected, barn perimeter. Then again, another alert, gate camera. I sat up fast, adrenaline dumping into my bloodstream like rocket fuel. I grabbed the .45 from the drawer, slipped on boots and a jacket, and moved to the security monitor. 2 figures, both in uniform, High Desert Estates polos again, khakis, ball caps. One held a crowbar, the other had a bag of tools. They were at the rear fence near the corral, right under one of my decoy cameras. Idiots didn't even realize it was fake. Meanwhile, the real lens above the feed chute was recording every damn move they made. They cut the fence, opened the gate. One of them pulled something from the bag. A rolled-up banner. No, a sign. They started digging, staking it into the ground. I flipped the switch on the floodlights. The yard lit up like a stadium. They froze, silhouetted like deer in headlights, dust still swirling around their boots. "Don't move," I called out, stepping onto the porch with the pistol in plain sight. "Sheriff's on the way." One of them bolted, dropped his tool bag, and sprinted toward the far fence. The other hesitated, then followed, stumbling as he went. I didn't chase. I already had what I needed. I downloaded the footage, sent it straight to Rivera and Lila. 10 minutes later, Rivera called me. 2 of them again. Same uniforms. One had a crowbar. The other had a sign. Let me guess. "Welcome to High Desert Estates." Bingo. You get a clear shot of their faces. Better than a passport photo. By the next afternoon, both men were identified. One was a low-level HOA security contractor. The other, a junior board member, same name from the internal email leak. They were arrested and charged with trespassing and vandalism. Karen tried to claim they were acting independently, but the DA wasn't buying it. Especially not after a warrant turned up an entire chain of internal emails, one of which read, "Install the signage at Marlowe's fence quietly. If he reacts, call it a misunderstanding. The land needs to be marked before Q4 hearings." Q4 hearings. That explained a lot. High Desert Estates wasn't just fighting for petty control, they were maneuvering for zoning reclassification in the next quarter, and my land stood directly between them and the proposed access road to Route 14. I wasn't just a nuisance, I was the wall. Lila and I added charges to the civil suit, attempted seizure by misrepresentation and conspiracy to trespass. The footage of the incident became Exhibit C. We made damn sure the media saw it too. I sent a copy to the Sentinel. They ran the story under the headline, "Caught Red-Handed, HOA Board Linked to Nighttime Trespass on Private Ranch." The fallout was swift. Residents of High Desert Estates started demanding answers. 3 board members resigned within 48 hours. One even wrote a public statement saying he'd been kept in the dark about Karen's tactics. Another referred to her behavior as deranged and imperialistic. Karen, of course, did what Karens do. She doubled down. She called an emergency HOA meeting and tried to rally support, claiming she was being attacked by a rogue landowner with ties to the federal government. That only fanned the flames. More residents showed up angry. A leaked voice memo from the meeting caught her yelling, "We will not let a bitter cripple shut down our vision." Yeah, that one made the rounds. Real fast. By week's end, my land was quiet again, but the war had turned. I wasn't just defending myself anymore, I was winning. The courthouse in Santa Fe was hotter than usual for early spring, like the sun had personally decided to crank up the heat for the occasion. I arrived with Lila an hour before the preliminary hearing. She was in full war mode, navy suit, binder under one arm, jaw set like granite. I'd seen that look before. Last time was when she tore apart a crooked bank auditor in federal court. That guy cried on the stand. I didn't think Karen would, but I hoped. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, mostly press, and a handful of nosy HOA members from High Desert Estates who wanted to see if their queen could walk on water. She didn't even look at me as she strutted up the courthouse steps, flanked by 2 lawyers in $1,000 suits. Her expression said, "I still run this show." Inside, we sat across the aisle. Karen's team looked like they were auditioning for a legal drama. One of them, a man with slicked-back gray hair and a gold tie, kept flashing that fake courtroom smile at the judge. Judge Cantu, a seasoned New Mexico district judge with no patience for theatrics, was not impressed. Lila opened with a direct strike. She presented the forensic signature analysis, laid out the forged jurisdictional overlay, then queued up the security footage of the nighttime trespass. The courtroom went dead quiet when the projector screen showed the HOA polo shirts creeping through the dust with a crowbar and a sign, and just to twist the knife, Lila followed it with Karen's internal email. He thinks just because he has federal paper, he can ignore the community. Karen's attorney objected, claimed the email was private board correspondence, taken out of context. Judge Cantu raised an eyebrow and said, "The context here appears to be conspiracy to commit fraud." Boom. But the real damage came when the DA stepped in with the criminal investigation summary. It included not just my case, but the other 2 properties Karen had tried to annex. One of the victims, Colonel Peter Graves, a 72-year-old retired fighter pilot, testified via Zoom. He spoke slowly, clearly, and with righteous fury. "This woman tried to steal my land through a map and a signature I never gave," he said. "If I'd done something like that in the Air Force, I'd have been court-martialed before lunch." Then came the widow. Her testimony was quiet, but devastating. She held up a printed map, hands shaking. "My husband and I bought this land in 1993. He's buried there now." She tried to say it was part of her community green zone. The courtroom was still for a long moment. Karen's lawyers tried pivoting, arguing that these were all just administrative errors, that Karen acted within the scope of her duties as HOA president, and that any damage was civil, not criminal. But the judge wasn't having it. "I'm seeing patterns of deceit, willful misrepresentation, and retaliatory behavior," Judge Cantu said, tapping his pen against the bench. "We are not talking about a fence dispute. We're talking about an orchestrated campaign to absorb private land through fraudulent means." He scheduled a full jury trial and denied the HOA's request for dismissal. Even worse for them, he granted Lila's request for a temporary injunction against any further action by high desert estates, including collecting dues, sending enforcement letters, or engaging with non-member landowners. HOA operations were frozen. Karen didn't smile on the way out this time. But the icing on the cake came 2 days later when the IRS launched a separate investigation. Seems someone had tipped them off that HOA funds were being misused for personal dinners, travel reimbursements, and undisclosed payments to a local construction firm tied to Karen's brother-in-law. The cherry on top, a hidden expense labeled Community Acquisition Consulting, which turned out to be a shady land zoning lobbyist. Now it wasn't just fraud, it was tax fraud. Lila grinned when she read the news. "Think she's sleeping much?" I asked. "Nope. And by the time I'm done, she won't sleep behind anything softer than reinforced steel bars." We were past the point of small fights now. This was a reckoning. Sentencing day landed on a Monday that started out calm, cool air, clear skies, and a coffee that actually tasted like coffee for once. I drove into Santa Fe early, didn't want to risk being late. The courthouse was packed tighter than usual. Word had spread, and now there were more cameras, more reporters, more locals who'd had enough of HOA thuggery and wanted to see if justice still meant something out here in the desert. Karen showed up flanked by 2 new lawyers. Her old team had dropped her 3 weeks ago when the indictment hit. She didn't look like a queen anymore. No pearls, no pressed linen, just a wrinkled suit and an expression like she hadn't slept since the IRS knocked on her door. The DA laid it all out, clear and simple. Forged documents, attempted land fraud, illegal surveillance, criminal trespass, and tax evasion tied to misused HOA funds. The court had the emails, the maps, the witness testimonies, the security footage, and even the handwriting analysis. And thanks to the IRS audit, they also had a line-by-line breakdown of every HOA dollar that had quietly slipped into Karen's lifestyle for the last 5 years. Lila gave the final victim statement. She stood tall at the center of the courtroom and listed every lie Karen had told, every inch of stolen land, every minute of fear and disruption she'd forced on people who just wanted to be left alone. She thought she could bury us in paper and fake authority, Lila said. But you cannot annex what you do not own. Not with maps, not with threats, not with lies, and certainly not with malice. This wasn't negligence. It was conquest. Karen didn't even look up. Judge Cantu's ruling was swift and firm. 9 years in state prison without parole for at least 6. Plus restitution of $3.8 million in damages, payable not just to me, but to Colonel Graves, the Navajo widow, and another victim who'd come forward during the trial. The HOA was ordered to dissolve under court supervision, its assets liquidated to pay restitution. Karen was handcuffed right there in the courtroom. Her lawyers didn't argue. They just watched. As she passed me, flanked by deputies, she turned her head just slightly. "This isn't over," she muttered. I smiled. "Yeah, Karen, it is." The aftermath was quieter than I expected. The HOA's accounts were drained, the office shuttered, the signs taken down. Residents were free to form a new organization if they wanted, but no one volunteered. The whole community had soured on the idea of ever letting one person hold that much unchecked power again. As for me, a month later, I was invited to speak at a private property rights conference in Austin, then another one in Flagstaff. Apparently, a retired agent with a ranch and a court win makes for good PR. I didn't mind. I brought my daughter to the Texas event. She called it the weirdest career day ever. The best part? Peace returned to my land. No drones, no flyers. No fake citations or goons with crowbars. Just the wind in the grass and the sound of hooves in the distance. At night, the stars over the New Mexico sky looked a little sharper, like they were glad I'd cleaned up the mess down here. I installed a new gate sign a few days ago. Sanded wood, carved by hand, burned lettering. It says, "Private Ranch. Not part of any HOA. Trespassers will be documented, reported, and ruined." Then, below that, in smaller font, "Go ahead, Karen. Try again.